Good morning, good morning, good morning to everybody here out of a wet and windy and cold Cape Town. Warm welcome to each and every one of you this morning. And a special welcome to our co-hosts this morning, the guys from One Insurance Underwriting Managers. We've got some speakers from them, specialists, rifle specialists in the area that will be joining us today. And also by default, we've got a speaker also from the UK. So I would like to start off the session introducing you to the guys and that will be speaking today. My name is Saki Stoltz. I am representing ASI Beshua, national footprint that we got right across South Africa as ASI Beshua. And then, of course, we've got the three gentlemen from One Insurance Underwriting Managers. We've got Nico Venter, a commercial head. Then we have got two Garys. So we've got Gary Carstensen, and Gary is in the divisional manager in construction and engineering. He oversees all the risks associated with construction and engineering business. And then we've got Nico Legrand, and he's the manager of PI and liabilities at One Insurance Underwriting Manager. So welcome to everybody. There's people joining us all over. I know there's some people up there in Limpopo, Cape Town, Gauteng, Pretoria. So all of you are most welcome. This morning we're gonna start, and I think we can just admit the people as they come in. I'm gonna thank you for your time on joining us this morning. I'm sure that this morning will definitely be assisting and be helpful to you because of the fact that it's associated to risks, and risks is one of those things that that's normally one of those. Is there really gray areas or is there not? And we will be unpacking this morning, and I'm sure that we will be leaving you with a lot of info. And those people that would like to share this, you're more than welcome to do that. We will be recording the session as well, and it will be available on the ASI Besher YouTube channel. So for those guys, and so if you're joining late and you're watching the recording, welcome to you as well. And I'm sure that you will enjoy the session. We're going to be busy for the next 45 minutes. So we're going to be doing the question and answers a little bit later. And but welcome to each and every one of you. So the question is normally in insurance, what if? And I would like to use this as a case study and as what the marketing material were doing the rounds on. We're going to be unpacking the construction liability per se. But before that, before we start doing that, I just want to share this with you, and I want to get you into the frame of mind. Most people on the call is in the construction themselves, or part of construction, or servicing the construction industry. Just ask your question, what if this happens to you? Are you ready for this?
Wat man? Het jy 'n ambulans gebel?
If you saw that on YouTube, you will agree with me, it's not a nice sight to see. Here's just a drone footage, and I'd like to share this with you as well. And you can see this was taken about 2 days later on site, or sorry, it was a week later. I just want to go back on that. Question remains, what if that happens to you, and on one of your sites that you're busy working on, this happens? The main purpose of and the main objective of this webinar is not to scare you at all. It's just to unpack a little bit of information regarding, and as it says, demystify. what liabilities there is on a construction site. Now, as I said in my video building up to this presentation as well, is that no matter who you are, if you're an engineer, if you're working as a tiler, if you're a builder, if you're a roof maintenance person, if you I see there's people on here which is in interior designing as well, and whatever your involvement is in these projects, there is some certain liabilities that you need to be aware of. And so this main objective of this session is to really unpack and to enable you to make informed decisions when it gets to risk, and when it gets to what do I need to have in place in order for me to make sure that I do cover all bases. And hence that's why I invited the guys from One Insurance Underwriting Managers to come and unpack it with me. And we're going to be doing it in a format which most likely is going to be the best way of doing it, is by asking the most common questions that normally gets asked by contractors and or by anybody involved within the construction industry. And what is the most common mistakes that people do make? So please have your notebooks ready. And once again, as I said, if you missed something here, feel free that be at ease that we're going to be, this session is recorded, so it will be available on the YouTube channel as well. So the first question, and I want to pose this question to Gary, Gary Carstensen. Gary, thank you so much for your time once again, and Gary all the way there from the UK. Gary, if you can maybe just share with us the first question, and the answer to that is, what is contractors all risk insurance, and who can actually take this cover out?
Hi, good morning all. Yes, so contractors all risk insurance is your basic contractual indemnity in terms of any liability that you as a client are liable for in terms of contract. What it caters for is a specific job, so a specific contract that gets awarded that can be covered on a specific once-off policy, as we call the insurance terminology, as opposed to an open annual contractual policy, where we can structure that as well for you as client in terms of catering for all your contracts throughout the year based on an estimate turnover anticipated for the 12-month period going forward. In terms of whom can take the cover out, that can again be any contractor that gets awarded a contract in terms of any indemnity that they're liable for in terms of contract again. It can be an employer covering his work that he oversees as principal, and likewise any contractor that is incorporated and involved with a main contract can obviously take out this type of cover.
Awesome. We're going to jump into the second question, and it's quite a lengthy question. It can be answered in quite a lengthy, and I know that we've got some time that constraints that we need to do this webinar in. But the second question is, what type of contractors all risk cover can be taken out?
Yes, thanks. So as I mentioned, there are the two options: a once-off and or an open annual type policy that we obviously can put in place. In terms of covers and how you dress it up is all dependent on you as client and the requirements in terms of contract. Effectively, it caters for any accidental physical loss or damage to the property, obviously, that you're liable for in terms of the contract. And it doesn't differentiate between a specific type of work. We cater for all types of work. So installation of a something, the erection of a something, the building of a maintenance of, etc., etc. It's all catered for in terms of that seamless policy. I'll touch briefly on the other questions where there are some shortfalls that people don't look at. But in a nutshell, it's your physical loss or damage to property that you're liable for in terms of contract that is covered in terms of this insurance policy.
It's also very important, and I just want to make a point there, is that you do sit down with your broker and make sure that the right cover has been taken out. That will address your needs. I think I just want to put that as just a note. Gary, the next question, and I know once again, making the point of, I know that we can speak, like you said the other day, we can sit the whole day speaking about, different, how contracts work, specifically, what happened there in George, and what was the best options to have in place, irrespective. I know they're still busy with the investigation there, but what subsections and or sub-limits can be included in a contractor's all risk policy, and how they influence a potential?
Yeah, so the most important, as most clients always come to their broker and insurers for, is third-party liability. In terms of the tender or awarded contract, most ask purely for proof thereof. And in most cases, that's all that's basically required, and was obviously in the past. Just give your minimum, which fits within the requirements of tender or awarded contract. But yeah, there's a lot of other subsections, and looking at the George video, one of the big ones would be removal of debris. Following a collapse of that nature or that size, removal of debris would be quite excessive, extensive, and yeah, having the right limitations on your policy.
I think I would just ask if you are. There we go. If you, sorry, Gary.
No problem. So removal of debris is one quite crucial aspect. The sublimits don't really get looked at. It's just thrown in as a package deal, but one size doesn't fit all. That's quite crucial to look at those sublimits. And claims preparation costs, another one that is quite crucial. Following an incident that could lead to a loss, it would take time to put the claim together, and that time comes at a cost, getting engineers involved, etc. What limitations are on the insurance policy? Is it adequate? I would guarantee in most cases it's very far from adequate following a collapse of that type or any smaller incident. And those are the three quite key elements to look at. They don't come at an excessive high price. It's all about the nature of exposure and risk to look at.
Sort of make a point here, and I think it's a point, and keep in mind that we're talking about the risks involved within the construction industry, and it's a wide variety of construction we can talk about. I know that there is some people on here today that is just merely a service provider to the construction industry. And I think the whole idea of this session as well, which I would just like to make very clear, is to give you the necessary tools in order for you to make informed decisions. Keep in mind as well as you as a business owner are always relying on a broker to make sure that they do the right thing. But also, it's also your responsibility to make sure that and this is the reason, to educate yourself in what can or what do I need to do, so that as we always talk about, someone needs to check the checker. In most cases, the biggest question that you normally will ask, and if I can just give you one tip this morning, is to ask your broker if they are a specialist when it gets to contractors all risk insurance, number one. And number two, if they are going to be placing your business or put your risk with a specialist contractors or risk insurer, because it's a big thing of unpacking and getting the policy done just for merely the sake of getting the policy in place, so that we are, at least we can prove to the powers to be that we do have something in place. The biggest thing comes in when that policy needs to respond. And who do you have next to your side then? Who is that people that are with those guys that is involved and are using George as an example? Who is that brokers that's involved there? And did they do the right thing? Did they advise the right thing? Did the people know what they were in for? That's all the questions. So sorry, I'm just making that a mention of that. Let's go on. Let's go to Nico. I think you have you raised your hand there.
Yeah, thanks, Naki. I think maybe I can just at this point ask, and not being a specialist in engineering myself, maybe just to say, in a typical example, from maybe something as complex as, the George example, what are the kind of, call it liabilities, what are the kind of things that, that now, once everything has been determined, that could be, where would the policy, for example, be able to respond? I mean, I'm thinking about, there's firstly loss of life. So there will be, that might be going towards the contract with the citizen. It's been found that it was due to ABC that happened, and but also, there's loss of property or value of property. There's a certain amount of construction materials that have now, that's all gone to rubble. Maybe just, the top three things, maybe if Gary could help us with that. What are the top three things that, and because in my mind, I would like to understand, and back to as simple as maybe, if less complex kind of claim where, you're working on a client's premises, it's a once-off job, and maybe, you're fixing, you're doing some with plumbing, and what could go wrong there, damage to property or resultant damage to property, or those kind of things. Maybe just, the top three things, maybe that, that where this policy does actually address those top three concerns, if I could call it that. Perhaps, I don't know if Gary could help us with that.
Yes, sure. It's always difficult to look at the George scenario. Obviously, it's quite a new incident. There hasn't been proven facts to what the cause of the destruction or the collapse was. So it's hard to determine how our policy will respond without proven facts. On a typical construction site, what can go wrong, what does get paid, what is covered. Obviously, with Africa, theft exposure is significant, high in value, happens often. So theft is covered. It's an all-risk policy. Theft exposure is countrywide high. Again, looking at that exposure, always look at your current quote or policy and see what sub-limits there are. Third-party damage to property, also a big one. Underground cables, piping that gets damaged on site. That happens daily, weekly, depending on the site. That's also significantly high in volumes. And accidental damage on sites, also quite prevalent, where contractors are delivering goods, etc., not looking at the existing structure. Last week it wasn't there, this week it's there, damage to the existing structure that gets built. Those type of scenarios happen quite often. Just to answer your question there, Nico.
Thanks, Perry.
I think we can move into the next question. We're going to have a section just now for question and answers for the rest of the audience. Nico, what is the 5 common mistakes that contractors make with contractors or risk insurance, and what should be looked at? I think this is the time where the notebooks need to come out.
Yeah, I think this one is for Gary, right?
Gary,
sorry, Gary. Sorry,
no
Gary.
problem. So as I alluded to in the beginning, a lot of common mistakes that get dealt are not looking at the pure risk exposure and or disclosing from what we see the correct facts. It's merely a tick box that gets provided, and that's all they're after in terms of cover to get the contract going. So one crucial aspect that needs to be looked at, as I mentioned earlier, is what indemnity you as client are liable for in terms of contract. So you get given a contract in terms of where you fit within that contract. Are you a subcontractor? Are you the main contractor? Where is your liability in terms of that contract? The contractors all risk policy that we're discussing is aligned directly to that contractual indemnity from you as client. So if you're not liable and you've got a policy, the policy is not going to respond. If you are liable and hopefully you've got the policy that's got the right limitations, the policy will respond. Another aspect that gets mistaken is the contract itself. What is the limitations? What are the subsections? They are overlooked. It's just, oh, give me cover for R1 million as an example, but the exposure might be 2.5, 10 million, whatever the case is. Not to complicate the terminology, but the policy is not a first loss type policy offering. So it doesn't cover any loss up to whatever the policy prescribes. The policy is a specific policy and it caters for the full contract as awarded, not a subsection or a portion thereof. So those are quite a couple of the common mistakes that get granted. Doing a proper needs analysis is quite crucial, but looking at contract should be number one.
Thank you so much for that, Gary. And once again, I think this is quite important. We do have a checklist that will be sent to each and every one that participated today that you can use on checking. You know, if you got all the necessary tick boxes ticked, you know, regarding your liability or contractors or risk insurance. I think yes, one of those things which is you know, normally overlooked is subcontractors. So can subcontractors be covered, and what should be looked at? Now, just the definition of a subcontractor is, I think that's important. You know, to know that a subcontractor is anybody moving onto the premises, which is part of you are responsible for, and specifically on if you are a contractor working on a site, and it the classification of a subcontractor will be anybody that is working on your behalf, how big or how or small it might be. So Gary, what can be covered, and can they be covered under the policy?
Yes, so they can be covered. They form part of the main contractor's policy as long as they are covered in terms of their legal obligations to do the work, and obviously form part of that contract. And that's typically building a house. The main contractor will get subcontractors to do electrics, to do the plumbing, possibly painting, various other specialist type divisions. All those subcontractors form part of the build, and as such would form part of the cover as covered in terms of the contractor's policy. We don't sublimit who gets what cover. The cover is the cover, and their portion of exposure and risk is covered in terms of that policy.
Awesome. This is most likely one of the questions is, you know, how do you determine the correct contract value on the policy? You know, how do you actually get there, Gary?
Yeah, so the contract value is determined as per the awarded contract in its entirety. So the contract must incorporate VAT as well as a free issue material aspect, if people are aware of that. Basically, what that alludes to, if you get a contract to install an air conditioner, as an example, and your client or the principal gives you the air conditioner to install, you are taking responsibility for that air conditioner. as an example, and that must form part of the contract value, and that is deemed free issue material. Anything that gets given to the contractor to install or erect or build. So effectively, it's the full contract as awarded, plus VAT, plus free issue material.
Once again, very important to get that right, because that's one of the things. When you get that wrong, could be a potential problem when it gets to when there's a claim, that you get paid out the correct amount. So extremely important that gets settled or gets correctly insured on the contract value. Turnover. It's normally, they normally say that there's a couple of turnovers that the guys normally use. It's the one for SARS and then the correct one. So what turnover do we need there, and why is it important?
Yeah, so the turnover on an open annual contractors policy basically determines your full exposure throughout the insurance period, being the 12-month period. And that is your full turnover for all awarded contractors within that period. So all awarded contracts within the 12-month period are covered in terms of the contractor's policy, and obviously should be disclosed then in terms of your contractor's policy for insurers to get the correct premium for the risk exposure for that 12-month period.
Yeah. So that's why the turnover that you disclose, and that's forming part of your disclosure, is to make sure that you disclose the correct turnover. Because once again, if you do not disclose the correct turnover, as what you and the broker discussed, it could be a potential problem. Once again, when it gets to when the policy needs to respond and pay out the correct amount. Gary, thank you so much for your time, Gary Carstensen. We will hear from you soon. So I'm gonna the following questions is we're gonna be discussing with Gary Lagrange. So Gary, welcome, and I'm somewhere gonna fall in with the first question is tell us a little bit more about professional indemnity and why is it important?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Saki. Thanks to you and ASI Besha, and to everybody joining. Professional indemnity, the purpose of it is basically to cover legal costs and claims for damages resulting from alleged negligence or actual negligence and errors and omissions in providing a professional service or advice. So an example of that would be an architect making a design error that leads to some form of structural issue, or if an engineer miscalculation results in a project delay and additional costs. So it specifically addresses the financial losses due to the professional mistakes or inadequate service, basically protecting professionals against claims made by their clients for alleged mistakes, negligence, or inadequate work. Just like Gary Carstensen said on the CAR, it's not what would be deemed a first loss policy, like your motor insurance policy. There must be a third party alleging some form of legal liability against you and that they have suffered some form of loss. The reason why PI is important in the built environment would basically protect our clients, being ASI and one's clients, against legal costs. So legal costs in defending yourself in court can be quite astronomical. I mean, if you look at a normal court case that would last, let's say, 10 days, and this is after all the work that's been done up until getting to court. If you're looking at having a senior attorney and a junior attorney, a senior counsel and a junior counsel, you're probably looking at minimum 120,000 Rand per day in court. And that escalates, court cases get sort of delayed, etc., etc. It also covers the damages or compensation that's awarded. So if the court finds the client liable, they'll have to pay compensation to the client. The PI insurance helps to cover these costs. And obviously those costs can also be quite substantial, just depending on the type of damage that has occurred and the financial implication or the financial loss from there. So PI basically safeguards the professional reputation. It also, as I think Gary Carstensen mentioned earlier, often it's a client requirement. So a lot of clients require any professional or contractor that's coming onto a site to do work to have X amount of indemnity and CAR cover. So to meet contractual requirements, you'd need it. And just peace of mind for the business itself. Knowing you have PI insurance or the CAR insurance would allow you to sort of work with confidence, understand you're protected, and if something goes wrong, it won't impact your own balance sheet as much as it would in the absence of the PI or CAR cover.
Awesome. That's quite comprehensively explained. Thank you so much for that. And question will normally be, Gary, who should take out this professional indemnity cover? Because I assume that most people that have spoken to a broker would have had the offer on the table on professional indemnity. But for those that didn't, who should take out this professional indemnity cover?
Yeah, of course. I mean, historically, I'm going to focus more on the built environment, but just a bit of a background. Historically, professional indemnity was only for professionals, i.e. sort of your engineers, architects, legal professionals, accountants, auditors, those types of people. But because the world sort of expanded so much, the definition and who can take out professional indemnity has sort of broadened. In terms of the built environment, in broader terms, the CAR, or the liability cover to the CAR, covers the physical damage occurred on or to the construction sites, while the professional indemnity covers the financial loss arising out of the professional negligence. So in effect, both are essential for construction projects. Anyone in the construction industry who provides a professional service or gives advice should consider the PI cover. Like I said earlier, it helps protect against the financial and legal ramifications of potential errors, ensuring peace of mind and safeguarding the professional reputation. In terms of the built environment, what we generally look at are architects, engineers, quantity surveyors, project managers, land surveyors, and interior designers.
Awesome. I think that is quite something that's been overlooked until you get to that position where you need to respond. And then, like you say, legal costs are astronomical.
I think it's also just as from a sort of claims perspective, I think even if you're dealing with a friend, everybody thinks, oh, it's a friend of mine or an acquaintance of a friend, that they're never going to sue. Once somebody's lost sort of 100, 500, 1 million, 10 million, the friendship goes out the window, and they want to recuperate their loss.
No, you're 100% right there. And I think that's the kind of thing, that we really want to emphasize this morning, is that, get your ducks in a row. And I think that is a thing that becomes more and more inevitable in making sure that, you got all the boxes ticked. And like you just said, I mean, that's normally, they say there's the mokste honde wat die seerste byt, né? It's normally, that friend of yours that you just quickly want to do renovation for, and there's something goes wrong. Yeah, that briars turn into court cases now, and you don't want to be put in that position and then have no offense, and defense in order to help you. Gary, the last question, and I think we can unpack over here, specifically on contracts, and we talk about contract liability, and why is it so important?
I think contract liability impacts sort of not necessarily just PI or CAR insurance. It impacts the business as a whole. So there's two parts to contractual liability. The one would be if one of the clients contracts themselves into liability, whether they knowingly do so or not. And that would be in order to secure the contract, because the value of the contract, what the insurance policy would basically say is, if you've contracted into liability, insurers won't be liable unless the liability would have attached in the absence of that contractual provisional clause. And the reason why insurers do that is it's not we don't try and run our client's business, but in so doing that, we also can't be bound by a business decision made by the client. But I think the important thing is in the absence of the clause, the policy will still respond. The other aspect of the sort of contractual liability would be our clients ensuring that there is a clause saying that they are only liable for 2 times the contractual fees, etc., so that it's that they're not open to sort of an open-ended claim. Also, they will only purchase X amount of indemnity in terms of a PI policy. You can't control what a third party sues you for. So if you're insured for 5 million and they sue you for 15, you've got an uninsured loss amount of 10 million, which you'll have to fork out of your own pocket or the business coffers. So that's where the contractual liability becomes very important.
Awesome. Gary, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate a wealth of knowledge. I think it's always nice to get it straight from the horse's mouth. And these are the guys that's dealing with this kind of thing every single day. Obviously, you know, in the construction industry, what we're talking about this morning, there is some claims coming through. What's a contrary to popular belief, people do make mistakes. There is some negligence involved somewhere. And then who responds then where? I think it's quite important to know that, you know, this kind of thing is something that can't be taken lightly. And specifically when looking at risk on a construction site or at any renovation, or if you're just merely doing a tiling or whatever you do, what happens if something goes wrong? And I think that is the question that we were posting this morning. And you got quite a few or a couple of information this morning that you can educate yourself in making sure that you're asking the right questions. Whoever is doing your insurance for you, whoever broker you have, that you can ask the right kind of questions. I think whenever we do a analysis, one of the biggest questions that we normally post will be what is your contract liability? You know, what is, and you'll be surprised how many people say, what contract you're talking about? We shake hands and we carry on. That's not the right thing of doing it. You know, you should have a contractual relationship, whoever, if it's for your neighbor, if it's for whoever you're dealing with, a friend, and then of course, I mean, if you do have serious clients as well, that to put that in place, because it's extremely important to do that. Just in a summary before we over to the questions, and I think we're going to first go over to the questions that we can. I see there's a couple of people that has raised their hands. So if you would like to ask the question, this is the time for the questions. That any questions from the floor? Talita? I think it's Talita. You can ask the question. I think maybe just unmute. Any questions?
Saki, I have a question.
There we go. Mr. Guy Jenkins, good morning.
Sorry, chum, I really battled to get on today. I don't know, it must be the weather. Tell me, I think really a very, very important point here for all concerned, and it may be stating the obvious, is that need to look at the contract, whatever the contract is, quite carefully. You know, it's fine to go and quote and to do it, but then you need to draft an appropriate quote that comes at a cost, but the cost is nothing like the pitfall that will occur if you haven't got an adequately protected contract. Yeah, the number of times in the building community, I've come across clients of mine in the building community that have been taken for a ride. Literally, they've done the work, they've done these things, and then the people just delay and delay and delay and delay, and You know, it's certainly something where there's gradual payments once you get to certain levels. I think needs to be built into your contract. Once you get to floor level, once you get to ceiling level, you know, things like that. It's really, really important. If you don't do things like that, then there are going to be people out there that are going to take advantage of the weak legal standpoint. And it's just personal experience from clients and people that I've met and known in this industry. Very regularly taken to the cleaners.
Yeah. No, I think you're 100% right there, Guy. And I think that's one thing that we start off with is obviously the contract. You know, what is your scope of work? You know, what are you going to be doing? And obviously, at the end of the day, whenever it gets to the sign off, you know, that you've done whatever you said you're going to do. Obviously, the sign off of that as well. I think
when it's bonded through a bank, that's quite nice in a way, because there's leverage there, because the bank will then usually only release money upon an inspection or approval by the person taking out the bond on it. And they usually then also send out their own inspectors and people to go and have a look. Sorry to butt in there.
No, you're 100% right. You are 100% right, sir. Thank you very much for bringing that up. And I think it's like you just said, you know, speaking from experience. Anybody else? Any questions?
Hi,
yeah, there we go.
can you hear me, Saki?
I can hear you there, Patrick.
Like I've got a question on certificates of compliance. I purchase certificates of compliance, and I'm a licensed plumber. So according to my board, everything that I do, I have to write a certificate of compliance therefore. I purchase them for about 198 Rand and we sell them to the client. So if the client wants a certificate, we sell that certificate to the client, right? If the client opts not to have the certificate because they don't want to pay for the certificate, what I'm supposed to do, according to my board, is write them a notice of non-compliance. Okay? If, however, a certificate is not written and neither is a notice of non-compliance, for any reason forgotten, or it's a difficult situation, you can't give the client one or whatever. So let's just, for the sake of the argument, say it was never written and something goes wrong. There's no track on what the plumber did or didn't do and what the client was notified about that was wrong on the installation, on the pre-existing installation, and what can possibly go wrong. So if something does go wrong, should the insurance then cover the legal costs, or would the insurance then just say that there was no notice of non-compliance, it was just a verbal agreement between you and the client that there could be an electrical fire if such and such, which the client didn't want to pay for in the first place to repair what they were advised to repair? So would I, as a plumber, be covered for something like that, or only if a notice of non-compliance was written?
Gary, you want to maybe take that one? Gary Carstensen?
Yeah, sure. So the contractor's all risk policy, and I think other Gary must also comment, the contractor's all risk policy would cover the material damage to the works. So should there be damage to the works, the installation of whatever it is in terms of the plumbing, that material damage aspect is catered for in terms of the policy. In terms of non-compliance, we have to determine what the approximate cause was. So not looking at what it was and what it is, what caused the damage and what was damaged is the material aspect of cover as granted in terms of the CAR policy. Other Gary, in terms of your legal.
Yeah, Gary, I think your policy would apply before the COC would have to be completed and handed over, or the certificate of non-compliance. So that the CAR policy would in all likelihood respond as long as there's a liability or the contractor was at fault. From a professional indemnity or liability perspective, clients are required, obviously, in terms of like your board would require you to issue the certificate of non-compliance, etc. So that's sort of a legislated requirement. We can't insure something that's in breach of legislation. So what would happen is if a third party had to allege loss due to the circumstances that were presented. I'm sorry, I just hear there's High Five Plumbing, so I'm not sure. I think it's Patrick, if I'm not mistaken.
Patrick, yes. That's right.
The circumstances that Patrick put up, we would be notified of a claim. We would investigate sort of the reasons for non-compliance. So what we would generally do is, if we don't have the full set of circumstances but need to get an attorney on board, we would get them on board to respond to the summons timeously. Once we have the full facts, in that example, Patrick, there probably wouldn't be cover because there's non-compliance with legislation. There was no COC. So yeah, that would have been a business decision by yourselves, or an agreement between yourselves and whoever the client was.
I think it's very important there. Thank you, gentlemen. I think it's very important there, Patrick, that determine liability. So the question would normally arise, were you negligent? And if the question to that is no, then the client is going to have to face whatever the consequences then thereafter is. So, and that's very important that you bring that point up, because remember, you need to, at any given time, for the lack of the words, you need to cover your wickets. And the thing about that is contractors don't do that normally. So what they do is, there's like you just said, there's a geezer that is non-compliant. You have done your bit by notifying the client, and you've done it in writing as well. Your liability is then provided in that you've notified. As far as I'm concerned, that is more than enough to move over the liability back to the client, because you've told him, listen, I need to issue this. This is the thing, either compliant or non-compliant, and that will be the grounds of the non-compliance or compliance. Will be the grounds of saying that was Patrick negligent or was Patrick not negligent. So keep in mind, as well as on liability policies, that's where the response comes from, is because of negligence. So, however, at the same time, is that to make sure that your paper trail is in order. We get a lot of these cases. We get a lot of these cases, Patrick.
Sorry, Saki. If there is no paper trail, though, if I wasn't necessarily negligent, but there was, let's say, for instance, I did tell the client that you may need an electrician to check this out, or you may need to do that or so, but there was no paper trail. It's not that I was negligent in the works, but I was negligent in notifying the client on paper.
That's it.
That's where it goes wrong. But so then if the client wants to take the plumber to court now because the geyser set on fire and the plumber didn't put it on paper, who is liable?
Very important to keep it very intact. And my advice to you will always be notify the client, and there must definitely be a paper trail. Or a notification of some kind, either WhatsApp where there's a response or whatever the case might be. But to keep that, because remember, now it's going your word against their word. But you didn't tell me, or you did tell me. So I think the most important part here is what we can learn from this is that to make sure that whenever there is, that you can feel that there is some sort of a compliance issue, or going to be a compliance issue, to notify the client. Because remember, now you can only take a horse to the water. You can't make them drink. So if the client do not want to get that, and then obviously you cannot take responsibility for that then.
Yeah, well, if it gets to that point, I think it's time for different clients.
Yeah, you're right. Get a different client. Any other questions? All right, guys, I want to wrap it up. And so what I would like you to do is, if there's anyone on this call that would like to know more about and just to check out if your portfolio that you have of liability is adequate, please feel free to make contact with me directly. I will gladly assist you in going through your portfolio, having a look and see if all the necessary dots is made and the T's are crossed, and to give you then feedback on that as well. And in saying that, is if we're going to be looking at your portfolio within the next couple of days and up to the end of the month, OneSure has put up a hamper that all those people's names will be going into a prize draw. And obviously, you know, we will be drawing that prize on the 1st of August, and you'll be notified a nice OneSure hamper for us just to have a look at your portfolio. So there is a carrot for you guys, for the guys that really want to know, you know, if their portfolio is 100%. Ladies and gentlemen, it's this time where I say thank you so much for your time. You will be getting a mail shortly on thanking you for attending. It's also the checklist that you'll be getting that you can use, and also our details if you would like to make contact with us. For those guys that watched on YouTube, thank you so much. This is the end of the session, and really appreciate it, and thank you so much. Thank you guys from One Insurance, and thank you Gary and Nico. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Saki. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Have a good one.
Saki and everybody.
Saki, can you send me the video or the recording and the screenshot? Sorry, bud. Yeah,
We'll do that
would
for you,
really
sir.
like to have this.
We'll do that for you.
Very good to pass out to clients and people that you know.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys.
Great stuff.
Appreciate it.
Great
Well
stuff.
done,
Thanks,
Saki.
everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.